Welcome to Recross the Paths. My name is Cade. Today I'm joined by Alex. Welcome, Alex. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
It's always a treat to get to connect across the country over shared interests. And today we get to explore a little bit of Old Border Cube, a little bit of retro frames and retro power levels. I'm excited to dive in.
Me too.
So, Alex, before we get to the cube specifically, why cube? Why is that something you care about now? And maybe how did you get into that?
Well, I started playing during the revised boom, and then I went away to college a few years after that.
For
And
clarity, like the set revised.
the set revised, yes.
Amazing.
Basically, if you're on the East Coast, that's like when you could start playing. If I recall correctly, like alpha and beta didn't even really make it out here.
Like all sold out almost immediately. Yeah.
Yeah, like they didn't even like distribute them that far or something like that. But maybe New York, I don't know. But yeah, so it was, I was in ninth grade and just like everybody started playing, and I started playing and revised. So I played through high school, even like a little bit competitively, and then I went away to college and I stopped playing. But then when I came back, I was like, oh, I'd like to start playing again. And there was only one problem, which was I didn't have any money.
Yeah. That can be a problem sometimes. Yeah.
And the format I was most interested in was a new format called Legacy, and then
Yeah.
it certainly needed money for that one. So I played around with that a little, tinkered, tried to help some decks, just testing online and stuff like that. But then I found out that some of the friends I'd made back when I was back home were playing, and so we got together and started playing. We played different decks, but there were like way different power levels, and none of us had any money to buy new cards or anything like that. And so I still have the original email in 2008. I emailed my friend and we started building a cube.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know our first debate was whether or not we should include illusions of grandeur and donate.
Yeah, legacy staple then. As I recall.
Yeah, it was, and it was literally like our first like curation moment of like, is this too are these cards too bad individually to warrant an inclusion?
Man, Alex, y'all way ahead of the curve there.
Yes, exactly. Although then we just basically played the powered vintage cube for I don't know 15 years, and then until just after the pandemic when I was like, oh, I wonder if anybody in Baltimore plays cube. Upon which I discovered it sure is maybe the center of cube in the whole world. I don't know.
Yeah, turns out, yes.
So I really lucked out on that one. But yeah, so basically it was just a like I don't want to buy cards. I can print cards, but I also can't afford printer ink to keep printing cards. And so just started playing cube, and yeah, I loved my friends not having to like buy stuff, bring stuff, because some of them deeply like didn't really care about Magic that much. They just wanted to get together, and so it was a good sell for them.
Yeah, it takes that barrier away. If people want to play, it's not like, all right, you have to clear this bar to come in.
Yeah, it really is just a little bit more like a board game than a collectible game.
When you were saying that you played a little bit at the beginning and then came back, I half expected you to say that the game was just so different when you came back that you wanted to reclaim some of that. I didn't know whether to expect that.
I mean, they printed Tarmogoyf, so that was a big blow, to the historic power level. But no, I mean the game wasn't that different, especially in Legacy, and that blue white control was still absolutely eating my lunch for every deck I created.
That was I started playing right around the Theros block, and so yeah, as a goober trying to play creatures, blue white control was ruinous for me in the age of Supreme Verdict and Sphinx's Revelation. So slightly different than
Oh
what,
man.
what you described, but
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I didn't play much during that era, but my other cube, that not one we're not focusing on, the middle school, is all based around that era, and so I'm playing with those cards kind of for the first time.
well, Alex, I have to say the naming convention is delightful, and I have to then ask whether the oldest school or middle school came about first.
The oldest school came about first. It came about now I think all of my cubes have come about basically in reaction to other cubes.
We are revolutionary, responsive folks here.
Honestly, it's like one of my favorite things about being part of the cube community at this very moment is like for so long, cube was not really like in conversation with each other. And then I think basically because of KubeCon, I could be wrong, I started kind of joining the community right around the first KubeCon. But like we all get together, experience a bunch of things, go back home, and then the explosion of creativity comes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so my cube came about because of the neoclassical cube, and the neoclassical cube came about because of the old border foil cube that was draftable at the first KubeCon.
Yeah, I love tracing those lineages of inspiration. Like you can
I
see kind
know,
of the
it's so
threads.
cool. It really fills me with so much warmth. But yeah, so right when I started in the Baltimore Cube group, Andy had just debuted his neoclassical cube. I was there for the first draft. It, you know, is still kind of taking shape and in rough form. But the thing that like got me was we were playing unsleeved, and I had never, literally since sleeved were invented, I had not played unsleeved. But as someone that started and revised, probably like the majority of my Magic games had still been unsleeved.
That's
And so it just anything you can do to feel, 13 again is really powerful. So, I played neoclassical. It was immediately my favorite cube of all time. It's still my favorite cube of all time. But about, I don't know, a year into it, Andy was asking us if we thought Covetous Dragon would work there.
yeah.
And, there was some debate whether or not it would. And then I was just like, this is an old border cube. Like, if you want a big red dragon, give people the old border big red dragon. And he was like, I think Shivan Dragon would be very bad here. And I was just like, oh, good point. I'm going to create a cube where Shivan Dragon is not bad. And so like the inspirational first thought was Shivan Dragon needs to be good. And then I was like, oh, and Serra Angel should be the best card in the cube. And that's just where I started. And not long after that, I realized two things. One was like, oh, I can then just blanket exclude every threat that's in neoclassical. Because I was just like, those are immediately, if Shivan Dragon needs to be good, those are all better than Shivan Dragon. So I was just like, that's super easy. And then the other thing was I had to really be careful about removal because the problem with big Bane Slayers, if you will, or Serras, is that, you spend 5-6 plus mana on a threat and then they spend far less to remove it. And that card's not going to be as powerful or as scary as I wanted. And I wanted to recreate that kind of like initial feel when people had tabletop or playground decks and somebody would play a big threat and it was very difficult to get rid of.
Yeah, it meant something when the decks weren't comprised of just 4 of 1 mana removal spells.
Exactly. Like yeah. Even like in a 60 card deck, it's like, oh, back then we only had maybe Swords to Plowshares, and so like finding it was still a little bit of an issue. But yeah, a lot of the games just came down to like who landed the biggest threat. And I tried to emulate that a little bit in that kind of like fear of the big thing.
So as we're unpacking these things, I want to make sure that we cover maybe the elevator pitch for the oldest school. Like how would you introduce this environment to a table?
I've always struggled with this one because I even the like cube overview, like I don't have any words written.
No,
it's
I love
just
it.
a picture of 8 old school cards and just because I think the elevator pitch should be like, do you want to play with big angels, dragons, and vampires? And do you want them to be good? Come play this cube.
Yeah, I think there's a real strength in that, Alex, right? So rather than a bunch of words to try to describe a feeling, there's just an ethos of here's a block of 8 cards, and if it makes you feel a certain way, pull up a chair.
Yeah, I will say nothing of tempo or combos or anything like
archetypes,
that. Yeah.
So, but the oldest school, I guess, is we would describe this as an old frame kind of nostalgia cube, right?
Yeah, it's all old frame, and like that took me a while to get to because I do love neoclassical breaks from the old frame for vibes. But then the more I was in this one, I was like, there's virtually no reason to do that because cards are too good almost immediately after the modern frame, and just especially with regard to the decision around fixing, like everything is just so old school feeling. It's all black border, with the exception of a few cards that have been altered, and the basic lands, which are all unlimited.
Do you have a certain time frame that you're trying to stay within, or is it more like just kind of based on some of the other goals?
No, other than the old frame, there's no time frame that I'm focused on, but it definitely you definitely exclude more power outliers the further you get on towards the modern frame.
For sure.
So like masks and all of that. I can never remember the order of everything, but they're. I wish I could get some more original like beta threats. Like I always look at my beta Elvish archers, and I'm just like, why do you not have reach? Like just get you're an archer.
It says it right there.
Yeah.
One of the things I appreciated about how you have this laid out in Cube Cobra is that you have a couple of things labeled as foundations. I know you mentioned
Mm.
Shivan Dragon and Serra Angel. Also, I would be remiss to not shout out our friend Brett, who has the Rent controlled cube, who I believe uses these same two cards to set the power level in that environment. So, shout out to Brett.
Oh, and it's so fascinating to look at these two cubes.
Yes,
Because his rule is they just have to be playable.
right,
And
right.
my rule is they have to be the best. And like the two cubes could not be more different. Like it's crazy how different those two axes are.
Truly, it's truly amazing the
Yeah.
the breadth of cube. So you have a couple of these cards labeled foundations. How do you use those to color what the cube looks like?
Yeah, I mean, they helped originally to flesh out the cards around them. Like, pretty quickly, I was like, Savannah Lions, like, no threat's going to be better than Savannah Lions. And even like 2 cost threats are going to like not outshine my sweet baby lions. And some of them I started with, I was like, I know I want this card to be good. And a lot of those were based around literally decks that my friends played in 1994. My one friend had an absolutely incredible 40 card because that was the original deck limit, not 60. And he played just a mono black deck with Dark Ritual, Hypnotic Spectre, which would be way, way, way too good here.
Yeah, like the OG turn one.
Yes.
You got it.
But he had Vampire Bats in there and Bad Moon, and I just adore Vampire Bats. One of my favorite things I witnessed was in a draft where someone played Vampire Bats and they were like, this card's not very good, right? And the other person untapped and immediately played Paralyze on it. And then they were like, oh, maybe they are good. And then they were like, 4 turns later, witness me paying 4 mana to untap my Vampire Bats.
That's right. That's right.
So anyway, so there's things like that. And then there's other ones. Aven Brigadier is a card that I was not familiar with at all.
I love Aven Brigadier. It's so goofy.
I loved the art. And then I threw it in, and I threw a couple of birds in, and already had some soldiers. And my friend Adam drafted it pretty early on in the cube's existence, and he went, I believe, 0-3, and he like handed me my deck, and he was like, I had the best time. Because he was like, I used to play birds, and like this is just so good. And I was like, oh, if a card can make you have fun going 0-3, then this card is staying in the cube.
Yeah, that's got to be such a badge, like like a little feather in your cap. Like, hey, this we've made something. Like we made something special. If people are into that.
Yeah, I was so happy. So it's definitely a mix of the foundational cards are kind of just a mix of the stuff that I initially loved and wanted. You know, Stampeding Wildebeest. I had a Stampeding Wildebeest Strike Bears decks back in the day, and then things that have come about because of other people's experiences and just kind of like Oh yeah, the original clone is just such a cool, fun card. I like cards that kind of like teach people a little bit about the history of what Magic was. Thawing Glaciers, for example, like is a card that is long since past its prime, but like Thawing Glaciers is really good here and was really good in a lot of competitive decks back in the day.
Yeah, a number of the world champs decks featured the the persistent Thawing Glaciers as a mana source.
I still remember one of them because the prevailing wisdom at the time was like two thawing glaciers, at most three, and then someone won a pro tour or a world championship with four of them, and they asked him, they were like, "Why are you playing four?" And he just took a second. And he said, "Because they won't let me play five." I'll never forget that.
That's so good. Well, and I think Thawing Glaciers is one of those that's kind of emblematic then of what the pacing of this cube looks to be. All right, Thawing Glaciers enters tapped, does not produce mana, and then you have to pay mana to sacrifice it to search for another basic land.
Oh, you don't sacrifice it.
Oh, sorry. You return Thawing Glaciers to your hand at the end of turn.
Yes, which I guess it was so that you could still like you couldn't dodge removal with it.
Right, like they could still strip mine it or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's one of those that it's a slow progressive engine that continues to gain value over time.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to like see people realize like it doesn't put you behind on land drops over like 3 turns, but it just eats up a bunch of your obviously your tempo, your mana along the way. But yeah, part of the other thing was like the first few times I brought this cube out, like it's very easy in Magic to just make a cube where the cheap stuff runs over the big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, Serra Angel and Shivan Dragon are not going to have that. So I definitely am like, I want the big, cool stuff. I want haymakers. I want giant threats. And so, yeah, I always tell people, like, you can draft aggro, but you're on your own because I didn't help you out at all.
Well, yeah, you already mentioned earlier that idea that you don't want removal to be so efficient that these bigger threats are a liability for you. Like, how did you approach removal in this kind of space? Like, you're not going to see a lot of what you'd expect.
Yeah. Basically, I was like, okay, so there can't be like a bunch of terrors, right? Like, it
Mm-hmm,
can't.
mm-hmm.
And so, one for one removal has to be chosen very carefully. The problem is, or maybe the issue to solve, is there are a bunch of little creatures that are actually like really scary or awesome in old school Magic. One of the foundations, Royal Assassin. Royal Assassin was an
Yes.
absolute menace on the playground. Like, just how on God's earth am I ever going to attack with this out? And so I found there was just enough removal in the old border that hit things with 1 toughness, with 2 toughness, with 3 toughness. And so basically you can remove Serra Angel, but you're almost always going to have to spend 2 cards or have Threshold or combine effects. But I needed people to be able to get rid of, Thallid, to get rid of
Mm.
all of the little monsters that the pingers and the little birds before they get anthemed up.
That's a sentence I would have not expected to hear, that you had to make sure there were tools to deal with Thallid.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one of the puzzles I haven't fully solved for, like, I think Serra Angel and Shivan Dragon have both done the thing I've asked them to do. Even just looking at the winning decks from the Salt Box, like half of them involved one or both of those creatures. The one that I want that I haven't got yet is Lord of the Pit.
Mm.
And the problem I'm having is, how do you support Lord of the Pit without also letting people make a bunch of ground blockers and just stall up the board? And, board stalls can be a real problem when you're running super slow old school Magic. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But yeah, Thallid just pumping out tokens every few turns after being played turn 1 can be a real issue.
And so do you think of this cube as being particularly slow, or do games actually move along once you're in them?
It is very slow if you're just counting turns, but the turns go so quick. And so, and it's old school Magic. Everything's pretty simple. The only real issues are attacking math, defending math, all of that stuff. But no, I've never found speed to be a particular issue. There's just occasionally like a card I put in that gums things up a little bit too much. And so I've had to kind of pick some board sweepers, very specifically some, I put in cards like Drop of Honey and things like that that can kind of clear things up a little bit. And then, there's always flyers. Flyers are very powerful and very good at ending games.
And as you noted, not as much reach in those days to help with that.
No, and I just recently added some because I think green initially was very powerful because I had a lot of ramp, and ramp is very, very good. And then I kind of cut down on that, and I think it's been lagging behind just a little. So yeah, I put in some of my favorite reach creatures, but notably not giant spider because it has all of the problems of just like never attacking, only blocking, preventing attacks, all that stuff.
Yeah. I was going to ask, because in addition to having things like foundations marked, you also have a watch list, some things that you're keeping an eye on. How do things find their way onto a watch list in an environment like this? Like, what are the red flags you're looking for?
It's a good question. I mean, there are things that I put in that I think are going to be of a normal power level or not warp any sort of play pattern. And then also just cards that I don't think are performing any function at all. And maybe I just had a really cool printing of them or something like that.
That's a good reason to put something in the cube, by the way.
Yeah, Sunstrike Legionnaire. I bought a foil at the Philadelphia Cube event from the store there, and I was just like, oh, I'll put this in, but I'm not sure it's making it happen yet. But a card like Dominate, I was like, oh, I have to be very, very careful about control magics here. I think control magic is a like crazy powerful limited card that can compete to this day in a lot of legacy style cubes. And so I thought Dominate, okay, going down 3 mana on an exchange might make it work, but some of the plays I've seen, I'm still like, oh, okay, spending 8 mana to steal your 5-drop is still too good. Like better than I want.
I imagine instant speed is also a key part of that one.
It's wild that they printed that at instant speed still. And I want it to lead to cool, very cool stories, but yeah, oftentimes just like blowouts. And, just my general distaste for the color blue and old school Magic, so I gotta keep an eye on it.
Blue definitely has a reputation, right? And I think that's probably a good moment to mention that this is definitely unpowered. Like you're not going to see Ancestral Recall. You're not going to see Time Walk or anything like that here.
That's true. Although I have long considered just throwing in a handful of Moxen because I just don't think they'll be anything but fine.
That's interesting. Like, do you think because you're not like powering into these unbeatable threats, or?
Yeah, like because everything is so slow, like just going up 1 mana in exchange for a card. Like card draw is so powerful here, which is why Ancient Craving is the best, like maybe the best spell in the cube. Like
draw 3 cards, lose 3. Yeah.
And so just the sheer amount of cards in your hand is so important when everything is going so slow. And there's just no tutoring, there's no finding anything. And so the wide power band makes drawing cards very powerful. And so, yeah, maybe getting your 3-drop out on turn 2, getting your 4-drop out on turn 3 might lead to a big tempo advantage, but also your opponent just having one more actual spell might do the trick as well. So I don't know. The only reason I haven't done it is just because I haven't had the heart to cut 10 cards or whatever to put a few cycles of them in there.
That seems completely reasonable. The oldest school summer vacation maybe is where you add the Mox.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Well, talking about Moxen, probably then a helpful channel to talk a little bit about how you approach fixing in this environment too. This is a mana base that is very fun to see, but you don't see often. I think you have 6 of each dual land.
The original idea was just and there was no real logic behind it other than feel or vibes or like this would be fun, right? It was just dual lands in the land box, but that proved a little too expensive, even though, believe it or not, the beta dual lands are not real. And so, like, I just was like, okay, what about 6 copies? And then I threw it in for the first draft, and I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, again, like not punishing slow decks by making them pay a bunch of life for their fixing, not having a bunch of shuffling to take up time. And then, just the feel and the look of them in a pack is so wonderfully evocative of old school Magic. And, I never get tired of people asking me if they're real, and to which point I'm like, oh, no, I'm not carrying around a $60,000 cube. I'm playing it unsleeved.
There are some who do, but not us
Yes,
today.
those people are braver than I, certainly.
Well, and you don't have, looks like, a particularly strong trend toward color balance in this cube either. Like, I think we're missing an Orzhov gold card, or like the colors don't have to match entirely. So does fixing go along with that?
Yeah, I mean, I have never had any specific appeal to balancing colors because I was on the Cube forums in the early days of Cube. I was always pushing for people to not have the spreadsheet balance or not focus on the spreadsheet balance. But the other thing is, gold cards back in the day were pretty bad, and so I have only included, I think, 14 total. And so the idea of like just playing 5-color good stuff here is certainly a deck. It's certainly a way you can go, but you don't get rewarded by wheeling a bunch of really powerful gold cards because there just aren't that many gold cards, and B, people will snap them up because the other thing is, not always hitting your mana on time, your colored mana, your on time is like not a death sentence here. You can sit around and wait a little bit. And so, yeah, it has played really well. People have seemed to have found the number like to be okay, where they're like, oh, I can pass one in my colors without absolutely kicking myself. But then, it does run a lot shorter than you think sometimes. And so people at the end of the draft still really like, I really needed one more Tundra, or I needed a Tundra, and didn't get it. So yeah, it's one of those things that I just kind of lucked into, and it seems to have worked out great. And it's also like, I think so many people, and for a very good reason, start out with very similar mana bases to some of the most popular cubes. So it was fun to just play something that's kind of like wildly different, both in vibes and in play pattern, and then have it work out pretty well, where there's still a reward to staying very, very focused and within a couple colors, and also you can do some very greedy splashes and hope it works out.
Yeah, do you think of the oldest school as having archetypes or lanes that drafters should be aiming for, or is it a little more open-ended?
I think it has to be more open-ended just because there aren't enough cards in all of the archetypes. You can draft blue-white birds, but like you're going to have to do some other stuff. I have not included enough birds for that to be it. And yeah, there are definitely archetypes, maybe more just smaller synergies. A debate for me has always been how much to lean into typal stuff, both for how narrow it can be to draft and how much those cards can be dead to other players. And also because I'm playing a lot of old version or beta version of cards that don't have the right card type. And so you have to be careful of that. So there's a lot of writing on the cards to fix that. But there are definitely archetypes, and the way people combine them is always very fascinating to me. The one that I didn't expect that I've really grown to enjoy is that there are prison cards here that are not what you generally think of as prison cards. There's no Winter Orb, there's no Static Orb, there's no Howling Mine, there's no Mana Barbs, like that sort of stuff. But this all came about because of the original version of the cube. I just threw Time Bolton. And initially there was one way to untap it. That was it, just one twiddle.
Or you have to do it the real blood, sweat, and
Well,
tears way of just
that's what
skipping
I
turns.
was like most fascinated by. I was like, because there are a bunch of old cards that were kind of like, draw 4 cards, skip your turn, skip your
Yeah.
next turn, or like there were just all these things like, and I thought of all the cubes that people might on a regular basis take a turn off voluntarily, this would be it. But it didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. People were afraid, or then like the one person that actually did it like actually got punished
Mm.
for skipping their turn. And so I eventually cut it, and maybe I'll bring it back someday. But the things people were doing with all of the other things I added to tap, untap, limit, untapping, things like this were so cool that I kind of ramped this up. And so you can definitely lean into a very weird resource denial deck. The weirdest of which is a card I had never heard of, which is a blue enchantment that only lets you untap as many permanents as you have cards in the graveyard.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is called Mist of Stagnation. It's 5 mana. There's no fetches here. There's not a lot of cheap spells that just cantrip or anything like that. So getting cards in your graveyard can sometimes be an issue. Threshold is a very big deal in this cube and pretty powerful. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed exploring that archetype as well as sometimes people just are like, oh, I'll just draft the good spells and the flyers. That works out too.
But if you can't untap your flyers, it may not matter.
Well, the best removal in the cube is Vengeance. And I love so much that Vengeance cannot hit Serra Angel. But yeah, no, the Vigilance is also a very strong keyword here beyond just its normal goodness, because I have Meekstone and Marble Titan and then all of these other prison pieces. And so just not having to untap them is so great.
Well, Alex, is somebody who has, I think, as you suggested, been making curatorial decisions for almost 20 years now. How do you look at making changes in an environment like this that is functionally a closed card pool?
That's so funny because I did assume that at a certain point it would grind to a little bit of a slow down. But this got drafted a bunch at the Salt Box, the tournament, and I had such a good time, and I felt like the cube was in such a good place. And then I just have a stack of like all of my old border cards are just separated by color in a stack, just waiting here. And I go through them and I just pick out all of the cards that I would like to think about adding to the oldest school. And I end up with piles of like 40 white cards and 30 blue cards and all of this stuff. And so I think I'll just forever be constantly like grinding through, is this cool? Is this cool? Is this cool? So it never feels closed. Like it just feels like the stuff I'm discovering as quote unquote new cards is just stuff that is buried in Scryfall as opposed to coming out announced by Wizards. But yeah, maybe someday it will feel more stagnant. But gosh, I'm constantly considering things, thinking things, gazing lovingly at cards and trying to figure out how to add them.
I love it. And it's a shame there's no Scryfall tag for cool. You can't be like, yeah, here's the thing I'm looking for.
No, there's an old border tag.
Touche.
Yeah.
You've already shared some of the, some really clever things that have happened in this kind of environment. But what have been some of your favorite things that you've seen players do or that you've gotten to experience as part of the oldest school?
Oh, wow. By far the wildest play I saw, I took this cube to the 3rd CubeCon, right? We're coming up on 4, right?
That sounds right. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I took it to the bar cube night, and I handed it in, and they were just like, "Okay, we found 8 players to draft this. You go draft something else." And so, like, I couldn't like give them any speech, And their versions of bar cubes are like a little bit different. Well, they have a little like explainer inside and all this stuff. And so, yeah, they just went forward and drafted it without really any knowledge. But I got to go like check in on them, and Basically, there's a way to get almost unlimited mana with mana flare and upwelling.
Yes. Her mana doesn't empty at your like at each step, basically.
Yeah, so it's basically you just get to bank your mana over multiple turns. And someone had, I can't even remember, a dinky little flyer and was losing the game horribly, but was saving up their mana and saving up their cards in hand. And then they cast Chain of Plasma on their dinky little flyer. Chain of Plasma does 3 damage, and then you can copy it by discarding a card, right? So they were, at 8 cards in hand, they discard 6 cards. So they do 3, the 18 damage or whatever. And then they cast Temper on their own creature. Temper is a 1 and a white plus X instant. It prevents X damage to target creature. And then for every damage prevented, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And so
Oh
they put
no.
18 +1/+1 counters and swung for lethal.
That's amazing.
I was like, I would have never expected this line to ever happen in a million years. I would have never seen it, would have never played it. And I just loved hearing about that so much. And because the cards are so weird, they get combined in ways I never expect. Well, one thing that's been very funny is walls, right? When I first created the cube, I had some walls in, and now I technically have no walls. But what I do have is the original Changeling, Misform Ultimus.
Yes.
I used to have a couple other Misform cards, but the reason I cut the walls was the first time we drafted it. I try, in addition to making the big flyers good, the kind of removal specificity here is an attempt to make auras good. I love auras, old school auras. There's so many of them. They're so cool, but they're just bad as soon as you learn about how magic works.
That's right. Right.
And so they can be pretty good here. And so someone played their 2-powered card and then played invisibility on it, and then which is unblockable except by walls. And then their opponent just played a wall. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want this to happen. Invisibility is still in the cube, but I cut all the walls. All the walls are gone.
Those are the lines of text that like never matter until they really do.
In my head, I'm just like, oh, never going to come up. No big deal. Unblockable, sure. But so I'm like, oh, well, now this really is never going to come up. But there are a few cards, but I think 3 in particular that really care about walls. Invisibility, Juggernaut, and Urnham's Djinn. And the amount of times, like someone thought they were going to win because Urnham's Djinn was going to give one of their creatures Forest Walk, and they were going to attack for lethal, and they removed all of the creatures except for the Misform, and they literally can't target it, or you can't block Juggernaut. And I just loved that so much. And you just get all sorts of wild. I had one of the coolest plays played against me, which is Dragonstorm has been here from the beginning. I love it. And a card that has really helped Dragonstorm be so good is Burning Wish. I wanted the wishes to be in here from the beginning. I just think they're super cool. And this is like such a good environment for them to actually be good at, because some of the cards are so like narrow or like Dragonstorm crazy expensive. You actually don't want them in your main board. The other thing that comes about, as in this play, is that Burning Wish gives you an extra storm count. So just kind of with nothing else in hand and, paltry 11 mana, you can cast Dragonstorm for 2, right? And so that's what I did. I searched up the 2 best dragons in the cube, Dragon Tyrant and Draco. And they both have a little bit of upkeep involved. And my opponent untapped and cast Exhaustion, which does not allow creatures or lands to untap for 1 turn for your opponent.
Hey, that will make a difference.
And I was like, okay, so this is 26 mana worth of dragons you're killing this turn.
With a blue spell.
with a free casting cost card. It was absolutely amazing. So yeah, so I just love the wild things that happen here, the cards that I get to teach people about. It's such a joy.
It's such an environment that's ripe for new experiences, right? Cards you don't see in a pacing that you don't see is really valuable.
Yeah, it's so rewarding to see old school players light up at the cards they haven't played in so long, the cards they remember, and then new players just, have this whole new world opened up to them of just, okay, wow, wait, what does this do? Why does this do that? How was this good? How is this bad? How are vampire bats playable? All of that stuff. And yeah, I absolutely love both of those experiences here.
One of the things you noted earlier was just a desire for, like playing these things unsleeved, or mentioned proxies as being part of that. Is that kind of to push toward accessibility for people, or is that just kind of a cost consideration?
Yeah, I guess it was originally just based around what I wanted the mana base to be, and then I was like, yeah, I don't want to buy a bunch of dual lands, but I want there to be dual lands. One of my friends, suggested there are dual lands that come into play tapped, and you could just marker out that land, but they're in the new frame, and so I was just like, I don't want that. And yeah, I guess because of the way I started in Cube, I have no allegiance to having everything be real or having everything be fake. There are expensive cards in this cube, and there are fake cards in the cube. And then, the fake cards, if you spend any amount of time, you can tell, right? They're not in any attempt in a way to fool people, but it also has this knock-on effect of having people take the right mindset into the cube, which is just relax and have a good time. Yeah, you can spend extra of your time and mental energy getting a slight advantage by looking at the top of your deck and being like, oh, that card doesn't look right. That's a dual land. But don't do that. Like, it's also unsleeved, so a bunch of the cards are marked and beat up, and you can do that. And so, yeah, I think its ability to encourage people to not be held back by price, and then also playing unsleeved is also rewarding in a weird way, because you buy a card and that card just belongs to the cube. I have a stupid capitalist brain just like everyone else, where in other cubes I've been like, okay, well, I can spend $300 on this card, because then I can just sell it for $300 whenever I'm done. And with an unsleeved cube, you just let that go. And there's obviously there's a bad part of that if you're struggling for money, but there's a good part of that when it comes to kind of just the peace of mind of like, okay, this is the amount of money I'm willing to spend to have fun with this cube.
Yeah, and I've heard people talk about it in the past of really a push toward treating these as game pieces and not commodities the same way.
Yeah.
And I love that it pushes toward the ethos that you want in the games as well. Like, just relax.
Yeah, it definitely, the vibes come across so much better when you're riffly shuffling and just enjoying. The other thing is like the kind of underrated, undiscussed thing is like cards just look better unsleeved. Like the art and everything. Like if if you're not putting a shiny piece of paper in between you and what's drawn on there, you can pick it up and look at it very closely. And I just love that.
You get the real character and texture of that card.
Absolutely.
Alex, as you think about the oldest school, the experiences you've had going through it and where it is now, what advice would you consider offering to other designers in their own step of the journey?
I'm sure I'm butchering this story, but there's an old This American Life about a French comedian who came to America, and he was wildly famous in France. He wanted to do stand up here, and he kind of had to start from the bottom. But there were a bunch of stand-ups that were willing to help him because of how famous he was, and so they taught him how to tell a joke in America, what the structure is, all the kind of like basics of stand-up comedy. And he was like working his way, and he was getting good. And they talked about in America, the final level of stand-up comedy is to tell jokes that only you can tell. If you think about Chris Rock or Shane Gillis or anybody that they'll talk about things that they have experienced, things that only they can view.
Mm.
And I think the best cubes are like that. They're, to quote Parker, make your cube a joke that only you can tell. And I think this cube came about because I wanted Shivan Dragon to exist and to be in the world and to be in this cube and to be in people's minds. And I had that because where I came from and what I had specifically in mind. And then there's so many inclusions here, as I said, about cards that I lost to and being tortured by Hand of Justice before homeroom, and so yeah, in addition to all of the great advice that everyone else offers, which is like throw some cards together, it'll be fun, get started. I think a step up from that is lean into the thing that you know about, the thing that you care about the hardest, and people will respond to that even if they don't care about those things at all.
I love it. That's great, Alex. So as we're turning toward wrapping up here, this has been so much fun to chat with you. I get to ask one of my favorite questions, which is, if you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick and who would you have do the illustration?
I have a very poor grasp of specific artists. Like when they get pointed out to me, I love the art on cards. I care about it, but something about it doesn't stick in my head. But my answer to this goes back to a theory or an idea that someone I knew had, which is that there should be like an American Idol search for who has the closest voice to R. Kelly.
Interesting. Okay.
And then have that person record all of R. Kelly's songs so that we can then listen to them guilt free.
Okay.
I don't know how realistic that is, right? But I deeply, deeply, deeply love the original art on Sylvan Library, and I've always wanted someone else to do it because the person who did it is so problematic. I won't name them.
Same problem with Relic Barrier.
Yes. But then just recently, one of my lovely online friends, Jane from Pack One Slick One fame, started offering to draw over problematic cards if you mail them to her. And I mailed her a card and she did such a lovely illustration. And so I guess my answer is I just want Jane to draw me an Arabian Nights Sylvan Library.
That's so good. And what a thoughtful connection to the community, too.
Yeah. So I believe I have one. I'll get around to sending it to her and giving her some ideas.
Sylvan Library and All-Star, one of my favorite cards to play.
No, Sylvan Library, sadly, far too powerful for this cube.
Yeah.
You would just immediately start spending 4 life to draw cards as many times as possible.
Yeah, it turns out better than Shivan Dragon somehow.
Yes, indeed.
But it would be a lot more palatable with very cool art drawn by Jane.
I completely agree, and I plan to make that happen.
Well, Alex, this has been a joy. I'm so grateful for you taking your time to share some with us here. If folks want to follow up, learn more about the oldest school or the middle school, or I suppose any of the schools, where would be the best place for us to point them?
I, like many software engineers, spend most of my day on the Cube Talk Discord. So I'm Alex W on there, and reach out or just come join in the discussion because I find it to be very fun and distracting me from my actual work.
Reasonable. It's a safe place for that sort of thing. We won't tell on you.
Yeah. There you go.
And thank you again, Alex, for the time, getting to share in the conversation, and I'm looking forward to potential opportunities to connect here in the future.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you this summer at a few events, and thank you for everything you do for the community.